I never thought I would be standing in a courtroom fighting my own parents for the roof over my daughter's head. But there I was, watching my mother refuse to look at me, while my sister Ava sat beside her wearing a white dress like she was attending her own wedding, already celebrating a victory she thought was guaranteed. The lawyer they hired, some slick guy in an expensive suit, was smiling at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum over a toy I never owned in the first place. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wooden railing in front of me just to stay upright. 7-year-old Nora pressed against my side, her tiny hand clutching mine with a desperation that broke my heart. I could feel her trembling. She understood enough to know that in the next few minutes we could lose everything. The home I had built with my own hands. The safe space I had created for us after everything we had been through. All of it could be ripped away by the very people who were supposed to protect us. The judge was flipping through the stack of papers in front of him, his expression carved from stone. My father sat with his arms crossed, looking anywhere but at his granddaughter. Ava kept glancing at her phone, bored as if this was just an inconvenient interruption to her day. My mother's jaw was set in that familiar stubborn line I knew so well, the one that said her mind was made up and nothing I said would change it. $40,000. 8 months of backbreaking work. Every bruise on my knees from laying floors. Every blister on my hands from painting walls. Every late night I spent building something beautiful while my daughter slept peacefully nearby. All of it meant nothing to them. I was just the family workhorse who had served her purpose, and now it was time to hand over the keys to the golden child who had never worked a day in her life for anything. My lawyer had warned me this would be brutal, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of watching my own family testify against me, twisting every act of love I had performed into evidence of my supposed obligation to surrender what was mine. The knot in my stomach tightened with every passing second. I thought I might actually throw up right there in front of everyone. Then something happened that nobody expected. In the suffocating silence as the judge reached for his gavel, my 7-year-old daughter let go of my hand. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Your Honor," Nora said, and every head in that courtroom turned toward her small figure. "I have something you need to see. Something my mom doesn't even know about." The judge froze, his hand hovering over the gavel. My heart stopped. What was she talking about? Nora pulled her tablet from her backpack, the pink one covered in unicorn stickers that she used to make her silly little videos. She held it up with both hands, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance I had never seen from her before. "These people," she said, her voice steady despite the tears starting to roll down her cheeks, "are not who you think they are. Before you find out what my 7-year-old daughter revealed that changed everything, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because you are not going to believe where this story goes. And drop a comment telling me, would you fight for your home against your own family or would you walk away? Because what happened next tore my family apart forever, and I need to know I am not crazy for the choice I made." Now let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started, back before the courtroom, before the betrayal, before I learned that the people who raised me were capable of something I never could have imagined. 3 years earlier, I was drowning. That is the only word that accurately describes what my life had become. I was 32 years old, a licensed architect with a portfolio full of beautiful buildings I had designed, but never got to claim as fully mine because I was always too busy putting out fires in everyone else's life. My marriage to Ethan had crumbled under the weight of my exhaustion and his distance, leaving me a single mother to Nora, who was only 4 at the time. The divorce was as civil as these things could be, but civil did not mean easy. I was juggling a demanding career with raising a child alone, living in a cramped apartment where the rent seemed to increase every 6 months while my salary stayed stagnant. Every morning I woke up at 5:30 to get Nora ready for daycare, rushed to the office by 7, worked through lunch, picked her up by 6, made dinner, gave her a bath, read her stories, and collapsed into bed, only to lie awake, worrying about money deadlines and whether I was failing my daughter by always being so tired and stressed. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I ignored it the first 3 times, but when it rang for the 4th time in 10 minutes, I knew something was wrong. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, my heart already pounding. It was the daycare. Nora had collapsed during playtime. They had called an ambulance. I need to get to the hospital immediately. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember parking. All I remember is running through those sterile hospital corridors, my heels clicking frantically against the linoleum until I found my baby girl lying in a bed that seemed to swallow her whole, connected to monitors and IVs that made her look even tinier than she was. The doctors ran test after test. Days blurred into weeks of appointments with specialist needle pricks that made Nora cry and medical bills that piled up on my kitchen counter like an avalanche I could not escape. They finally diagnosed her with a rare autoimmune condition that would require ongoing treatment, regular monitoring, and medications that cost more per month than my car payment. I had insurance, but insurance did not cover everything. There were copays and deductibles and out-of-network specialists and experimental treatments that might help but were not approved yet. I watched my savings account drain like someone had pulled a plug at the bottom. I sold my car and bought a cheaper one. I stopped buying new clothes. I learned to make one chicken last for 5 meals. But it was never enough. That was when my mother called. Her voice was warm and concerned in a way that made me want to cry with relief. She had heard about Nora's condition through my aunt and she wanted to help. Why did I not come home? Why did I not move back closer to them? They had that old carriage house in the backyard, the one that used to be a storage shed and garage. It was not much, but it had good bones. If I wanted to fix it up, I could live there. No rent. I could save money, focus on getting Nora healthy, and have family support nearby. He hesitated. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. They were traditional people who valued appearances and family reputation above almost everything else. My younger sister Ava had always been their golden child, the one who could do no wrong while I was the responsible one, the one expected to handle everything without complaint. But desperation has a way of making you ignore red flags you would normally see from a mile away. I agreed. Within a month, I had quit my job, found a new position at a smaller firm closer to my parents' home, and moved my belongings into that dilapidated carriage house. Calling it a house was generous. It was basically a 2-story garage with a loft filled with decades of accumulated junk, rusty tools, broken furniture, and mice. The windows were cracked, the floor was uneven, the electricity was questionable, and there was no proper insulation. But I saw potential. I saw a home for my daughter. I saw a place where we could rebuild. My parents said all the right things initially. Take your time, sweetie. Make it your own. Family takes care of family. My father even helped me haul out the first load of junk. My mother brought over sandwiches while I worked. Ava stopped by once, wrinkled her nose at the mess, and said something about how she could never live in something so small before leaving. I should have paid more attention to that comment. I threw myself into the renovation with every ounce of energy I had left after work and taking care of Nora. I researched building codes and pulled permits. I spent my weekends at hardware stores comparing prices and learning the difference between drywall screws and wood screws. I taught myself to use power tools by watching YouTube videos on my phone. I hired contractors for the things I could not do myself, the electrical work and the plumbing, paying them with money I scraped together from overtime hours and skipping meals. I remember the nights most clearly. After Nora fell asleep, I would go back out to the carriage house and work by the light of a camping lantern and my phone flashlight. My hands developed calluses. I got splinters that I picked out with tweezers. I breathed in sawdust until I coughed. I painted walls until my shoulders ached and my back screamed. I installed flooring on my knees until they were bruised purple and yellow. But slowly, impossibly, it came together. I knocked down a non-load-bearing wall to open up the main space. I installed new windows that let in sunlight. I built a loft bedroom for myself so Nora could have the larger room on the main floor. I chose warm colors for the walls, soft yellows and gentle blues colors that felt like hope. I found secondhand furniture and refinished it. I planted flowers in the window boxes. Nora would sit nearby while I worked coloring in her books or building elaborate cities with her blocks. She would bring me glasses of water and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. Sometimes she would pick up a paintbrush and help me, her little hand barely able to grip the handle, painting wobbly lines that I told her were absolutely perfect. It took me 8 months and approximately $40,000 of my own money. $40,000 in materials, permits, contractor fees, appliances, fixtures, and furniture. I kept every single receipt, every invoice, every bank statement showing where the money came from. I documented everything with photographs, before and after shots that showed the transformation. When it was finished, it was beautiful. It was ours. It was a real home with a functional kitchen, a bathroom with a tub deep enough for Nora to play with her bath toys, heating that actually worked, and a small backyard space where I planted a vegetable garden. I hung curtains my grandmother had made the only thing I had left of her. I put up photos of Nora and me of her at the hospital, making funny faces of her first day at her new school, of us covered in paint and laughing. My parents came to the housewarming dinner I made. My mother walked through, slowly touching the walls, peering into cabinets. My father nodded approvingly at the craftsmanship. Ava barely glanced up from her phone. "It is cute," she said in a tone that suggested she thought it was anything but. "Very cozy." I learned later that cozy was her code word for small and unimpressive. Life settled into a new rhythm. Nora's health stabilized with the new treatment plan her doctors had developed. I was closer to her school, which meant I could actually attend parent-teacher conferences and school plays. I was performing well at my new job, picking up clients and building a reputation. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But Ava was circling. I did not recognize it at first because I did not want to see it. She started visiting more often, always with some excuse. She needed to borrow a cup of sugar. She wanted to check on Nora. She was just in the neighborhood. She would walk through my home with her eyes scanning everything, measuring, calculating. She would make comments. "This would look better with the wall knocked out. You should really repaint this color. I would put a bigger couch here." I brushed it off as sisterly advice until the Sunday dinner that changed everything. My parents still did the traditional Sunday family dinner, a habit from our childhood that they maintained religiously. I usually brought a side dish, and Nora and we would eat together at their dining table, the same one we had eaten at growing up. These dinners were often tense. My mother would ask pointed questions about my job, my dating life, whether I was taking care of myself. My father would mostly stay silent, occasionally grunting in agreement with whatever my mother said. Ava would talk endlessly about her own life, her dates, her shopping trips, her plans. This particular Sunday, the air felt different from the moment we walked in. Heavier. My mother's smile was too tight. My father would not look at me. Ava sat across from me with a strange excitement in her eyes, like a cat that had cornered a mouse. We made it halfway through the pot roast before Ava struck. So she said brightly, setting down her fork with a clink that seemed too loud. "I have been thinking a lot about my future lately. I am 30 now, and I really think it is time for me to settle down, Get my own place. Start building equity instead of throwing money away on rent." My mother nodded encouragingly. My father continued chewing his eyes on his plate. I felt Nora press closer to my side. And I was thinking Ava continued, her eyes now locked on mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. The carriage house would be absolutely perfect for me. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. For a moment, I was sure I had misheard her. What I managed to say? "The carriage house," Ava repeated slower this time, as if explaining something to a child. "It would be perfect for me. It is the right size for someone single. It is already renovated, and it is here with Mom and Dad. I would not have to worry about lawn maintenance or anything like that." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to laugh to tell Ava she was being ridiculous. But my mother's face was carefully neutral, and my father was now very interested in his green beans. "Ava," I said, my voice shaking, "that is my home. Nora's home." "Well, technically," Ava said with a little shrug, "it is Mom and Dad's property. You are just living there." "I renovated it," I said louder now. "I paid for everything. I have the receipts. I got the permits in my name." "That was very generous of you," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Improving your father's property like that, I am sure, increased the value considerably." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "You cannot be serious. You told me I could make it my home." "We told you that you could stay there," my father said, finally looking up. "We never said it was yours." Nora's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tightly. I could feel her trembling. She was only 7, but she understood enough to know that something terrible was happening. "I need this," Ava said, and now her voice had taken on a whining quality. "I have been struggling. My rent is so expensive. I am barely making ends meet. You have a good job. You could afford to rent somewhere else. It is not fair that you get to live there for free while I am drowning in bills." The irony of Ava, who worked part-time at a boutique and spent her weekends shopping, claiming poverty while I had been working myself to exhaustion, was not lost on me. But what shocked me more was that my parents were nodding along like she was making perfect sense. "We think it is time for you to move on anyway," my mother said. "Nora is getting older. She needs to be in a real neighborhood with other children, not stuck in our backyard." "She loves it here," I said desperately. "She has friends at her school. She is healthy and happy. Please do not do this." It is already decided, my father said with finality. Ava needs the house. You have 90 days to find another place. I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to be my family. My parents would not meet my eyes. Ava was smiling. And Nora, my sweet brave daughter, was crying silently, tears streaming down her face while she tried to stay quiet. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. Let's go, baby, I said to Nora, my voice surprisingly steady despite the fact that my world was crumbling. We left without another word. The next week was a blur of frantic research and phone calls. I contacted a lawyer, a kind woman named Sarah, who specialized in property disputes. I showed her every receipt, every permit, every photograph. I explained the situation, and she listened with a grave expression. You have a strong case, she said finally. You have clearly invested significant money and labor into improving this property, with the understanding it would be your home. That creates what is called a constructive trust or equitable interest. But I need to warn you, Clara. Fighting your own parents in court is going to be emotionally devastating. They will say things designed to hurt you. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Nora, about the little vegetable garden we had planted together, about the curtains my grandmother had made that hung in our windows. I thought about every callus on my hands and every bruise on my knees from building that home. I am prepared, I said. Then came the eviction notice. It arrived by certified mail, an official document with a case number and a court date. My parents were suing me for unlawful detainer, claiming I was refusing to leave their property. The language was cold and legal, nothing like the people who had raised me. I felt physically ill reading it, but beneath the nausea was something else. Anger. Pure, clean anger that burned through the shock and hurt. I was not going to let them do this. I was not going to teach my daughter that it was okay to let people walk all over you, even if those people were family. I was going to fight. I started documenting everything. I took photographs of every inch of the carriage house, with my phone videos walking through each room, explaining what I had done and how much it had cost. I made copies of all my bank statements, showing the withdrawals and payments to contractors. I scanned every receipt and created digital folders organized by category: materials, labor permits, appliances, furnishings. I saved every text message and email from my parents, especially the ones where they had encouraged me to make it my own and stay as long as you need. I also called Ethan. My ex-husband and I had not spoken much since the divorce, beyond coordinating Nora's visits. He had moved to another city for work, and our communication was mostly through text messages about pickup times and school schedules. But I needed help, and despite everything that had gone wrong between us, Ethan had always been a good father to Nora. I explained the situation, my words tumbling out in a rush. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Your parents are actually trying to evict you, he said, finally, his voice filled with disbelief. After everything you did. Yes, I said, and then to my horror I started crying. Not polite tears, but ugly sobbing that I tried to muffle by pressing my hand over my mouth. Okay, Ethan said, and his voice had shifted into the calm, problem-solving tone I remembered from when we were together. Okay, Clara. Listen to me. You are not going to face this alone. I am going to help you. I will make some calls. I know some people. We are going to fight this. And he did. Ethan contacted a former colleague who had gone into property law, a sharp man named Marcus, who agreed to take my case. Marcus reviewed my documentation and gave me the same assessment as Sarah, but he was more optimistic. This is actually clearer cut than most cases like this, he said. You have paper trails that most people do not think to keep. And the fact that you got permits in your name shows intent to make substantial improvements. We can win this. Meanwhile, Ava's visits to the carriage house became more frequent and more invasive. She had a key a spare my parents had apparently given her, and she would let herself in whenever she wanted. I would come home from work to find her measuring walls, taking photos, rearranging my furniture. Once I caught her in Nora's room, going through her toys. Just seeing what I will need to replace Ava, said cheerfully when I demanded to know what she was doing. Some of this stuff is pretty worn out. I changed the locks that night. The next day, my mother called screaming about how I had locked them out of their own property. I calmly informed her that I would be happy to provide access for legitimate property inspections with 48 hours notice, as was my right as a tenant, but Ava no longer had permission to enter my home uninvited. My mother hung up on me. Things escalated. My parents cut off all contact with Nora. No birthday card. No phone calls. Nothing. Nora would ask me why Grandma and Grandpa did not want to see her anymore, and I had to explain in 7-year-old terms that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that have nothing to do with her, that she was loved and perfect, and none of this was her fault. Then there was the carbon monoxide detector incident. I came home one day to find the detector in our main living area beeping weakly, its battery dying. When I went to replace the battery, I discovered the detector itself had been tampered with. The back panel was loose, and the battery had been deliberately removed and set aside. If I had not noticed, if I had not been home, if we had run the heater that night with a detector that was not functioning, the consequences could have been deadly. I filed a police report, though. I had no proof of who had done it. But I knew. In my good, I knew. I also changed the entry code on our new smart lock system and installed security cameras. The cameras were small and discreet, positioned to cover the entrances and the main living area. I told myself it was just for safety to have evidence, if anyone tried to break in or cause more damage. I had no idea that Nora had been doing her own documentation. My daughter had always loved making little videos on her tablet. She would record herself singing songs, putting on shows with her stuffed animals, narrating tours of her room. I thought it was adorable and harmless a way for her to be creative. I did not realize she had also been recording other things. Nora had captured footage of my mother and Ava during one of their visits before I changed the locks. She had been in her room supposedly playing, but her tablet had been propped up on her bookshelf recording. At 7 years old, she somehow understood that something bad was happening and that we might need evidence. The videos she captured were damning. In one, Ava and my mother were in my small home office area going through my papers and files. "We need to find something we can use," my mother said, clearly on the recording. Something that shows she was planning to leave anyway or that she knew this was temporary. In another clip, Ava was examining the carbon monoxide detector, the same one that I later found tampered with. "If this fails inspection, she will have to move out faster," Ava said with a laugh. My mother did not stop her. Instead, my mother's voice came through clearly. "We will just say we did not know anything about it." There was more. A video of Ava on the phone with someone, probably a friend, bragging about how she was about to get a free house that my stupid sister fixed up for me. A clip of my mother tightening, then deliberately loosening a pipe connection under my kitchen sink, causing a slow leak that I discovered days later. I did not know about any of these videos until the day of the court hearing. Nora had kept them secret, saved in a hidden folder on her tablet that she had learned to create by watching YouTube tutorials. She was protecting us the only way a 7-year-old knew how. The day of the hearing arrived. I had barely slept for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined losing, imagined packing up our life again, imagined Nora's face as I told her we had to leave our home. I made myself sick with worry. Marcus met me at the courthouse. He had prepared me as best he could, warned me that my parents' lawyer would try to paint me as ungrateful and entitled, would minimize my contributions, would make it sound like I had been given a generous gift and was now refusing to appreciate it. Ethan arrived too, surprising me. He had driven 4 hours to be there. "You are not doing this alone," he said simply, and squeezed my shoulder. We entered the courtroom, and that is when I saw them. My parents sitting ramrod straight on the other side of the room. My mother in a conservative dress, my father in a suit he probably had not worn since my grandmother's funeral. Ava beside them in that white dress, looking like some sort of bride, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. They did not look at me. Not once. The hearing began. The lawyer representing my parents was exactly as polished and confident as I had feared. He painted a picture of loving parents who had generously allowed their adult daughter to stay on their property rent-free, who had given her permission to make improvements, and who were now simply asking her to move on so their younger daughter could have a chance at stability. "Miss Ava Smith," he said, gesturing to my sister, "has been financially struggling. She works hard but cannot afford the exorbitant rents in this area. Her parents, out of the goodness of their hearts, want to help her the same way they helped her older sister. But Miss Clara Thompson refuses to leave despite having a well-paying job and the means to find other housing. She is essentially squatting on property that does not belong to her." I felt my face burn with anger and humiliation. Marcus squeezed my arm, reminding me to stay calm. Then it was our turn. Marcus methodically presented the evidence. Receipts totaling $40,000. Bank statements showing payments to contractors. Building permits issued in my name. Photographs showing the before and after transformation. Text messages from my mother saying, "Take your time and make it your home." Emails from my father discussing renovation plans. Your Honor, Marcus, said his voice clear and strong. Miss Thompson did not simply stay on her parents' property. She fundamentally transformed an uninhabitable structure into a livable home with her own money and labor. She obtained proper permits, hired licensed contractors, and invested 8 months of work. She did this with the explicit encouragement and approval of her parents, who never once suggested this arrangement was temporary or that she would be expected to leave. She has established what is known as a constructive trust, an equitable interest in the property based on her substantial investment and the reasonable expectation that this would be her permanent home. I took the stand and testified, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger as I spoke. I explained every detail of the renovation. I talked about learning to use power tools, about the late nights working by flashlight, about choosing every paint, color, and fixture with care. I described the conversations with my parents, where they encouraged me to settle in, to put down roots. They told me this would be my home, I said, looking directly at the judge. They watched me pour my savings into it. They never once said it was temporary. And now they want to give it to my sister, who contributed nothing simply because she asked for it. Then it was Ava's turn. She stood up and I watched her transform. Her face arranged itself into an expression of wounded innocence. Her voice took on a trembling quality. I just want a chance, she said. I have been working so hard trying to save money, trying to get ahead. But everything is so expensive. I am tired of struggling. When I saw how beautiful Clara made the carriage house, I thought maybe finally I could have something nice too. I did not realize she would be so selfish about it. Our parents are offering her money to move. They are being so generous. But she is being stubborn and mean. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I saw the judge's expression soften slightly and my heart sank. Then Nora stood up. My daughter, who barely reached the top of the chairs in front of her, stood up and said in her clear, high voice, "Your Honor, may I please show something that my mom does not know about?" The courtroom went silent. The judge looked surprised, then curious. "Young lady," he said, not unkindly, "what is your name?" "Nora Thompson," she said. "I am 7 years old. And I have videos that show what really happened." I turned to look at my daughter in shock. She was holding her tablet, the pink case covered in stickers, and she was walking toward the front of the courtroom with a determination that made my heart both break and swell with pride. Marcus stood up quickly. "Your Honor, I was not aware of this evidence, but I would like to request permission to present it." My parents' lawyer objected immediately, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "I want to see what this child has," he said. Nora handed her tablet to the court clerk, who connected it to the courtroom's display system. And then on the large screen at the front of the room, everyone watched as my mother and sister systematically plotted against me. The first video played. My mother's voice filled the courtroom. "We need to find something we can use." The image showed them rifling through my papers, invading my privacy, searching for ammunition. The courtroom was utterly silent, except for the audio from the videos. The second video showed Ava examining the carbon monoxide detector. Her words, "If this fails inspection, she will have to move out faster," hung in the air. Then my mother's voice, "We will just say we did not know anything about it." I heard someone gasp. I did not look away from the screen. The third video was Ava on the phone, her voice full of malicious glee. "I am about to get a free house that my stupid sister fixed up for me. She has always been such an easy target. Mom and Dad will just guilt her into leaving, and I get the place without having to do any of the work. She is so pathetic, always trying to please everyone." The fourth video showed my mother deliberately loosening a pipe under my sink water, already starting to drip. "This should cause some problems," she muttered to herself. When the videos finished, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. I finally turned to look at my parents and Ava. My mother's face was sheet white. My father was staring at his hands. Ava's mouth was opening and closing like a fish, no sound coming out. Nora walked back to me and climbed into my lap, burying her face in my shoulder. "I am sorry I did not tell you, Mommy," she whispered. "I wanted to surprise them." "You did so good, baby," I whispered back, my voice choked with tears. "You are so brave." My parents' lawyer was scrambling, trying to object, trying to claim the videos were edited or taken out of context. But the judge's face had transformed. The slight sympathy he had shown Ava was gone, replaced with something cold and hard. "I have seen enough," the judge said, cutting off the lawyer mid-sentence. He looked directly at my parents and Ava, his expression one of barely contained disgust. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many family disputes. but I have rarely seen such calculated manipulation and such callous disregard for a daughter and granddaughter. He turned to me. Miss Thompson, based on the evidence presented, it is clear that you made substantial improvements to the property in question with the reasonable expectation that it would serve as your permanent residence. Your parents encouraged this belief and accepted your financial contributions without ever clarifying that the arrangement was temporary. That constitutes a constructive trust. He looked back at my parents. Furthermore, the video evidence shows a pattern of harassment, property damage, and potential endangerment. The tampering with a safety device is particularly egregious. He made his ruling. I was granted legal ownership of the carriage house based on my financial investment and the doctrine of equitable conversion. The land it sat on would remain my parents' property, but they were required to grant me a permanent easement and right of access. They were ordered to pay my legal fees. And most importantly, they were served with a restraining order. Neither they nor Ava could come within 100 feet of the carriage house or contact Nora or me except through legal counsel. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like freedom. I do not remember much of what happened immediately after. I remember Nora hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. I remember Marcus shaking my hand and congratulating me. I remember Ethan's arm around my shoulders as we walked out of the courtroom. And I remember looking back once to see my mother crying and my father's face stone cold with rage while Ava stood frozen in her white dress, suddenly looking ridiculous. The first thing I did when we got home was have the locks changed again, this time with heavy-duty deadbolts. The locksmith, a kind man in his 50s, noticed my shaking hands as I signed the paperwork. "Family trouble?" he asked gently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You did the right thing," he said. "Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love, or the people we think we are supposed to love." That night, after Nora was asleep, I sat alone in my living room, the room I had painted and furnished and poured my heart into, and I finally let myself cry. Not sad tears, but tears of relief and exhaustion and bone-deep weariness. I had won, but winning did not erase the hurt. It did not change the fact that my parents had chosen my sister over me, that they had been willing to make my child and me homeless for Ava's convenience. The aftermath was messy. My mother tried to contact me through other relatives, sending messages about how I had humiliated the family and destroyed relationships that could never be repaired. My father showed up at the property line once, standing just far enough away to not violate the restraining order, glaring at the carriage house. I called the police and an officer came and explained the order to him again. He left without a word. Ava, true to form, went on a social media rampage. She posted cryptic messages about toxic family members and being betrayed by the people you trust most. Her friends who did not know the full story left supportive comments. I blocked her on everything and refused to engage. But Ava's real karma came in the form of her own choices. About 2 months after the court case, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ava had bought a condo. She posted photos on Instagram showing off her first home with the hashtags blessed and adulting and new beginnings. I felt a small twist of jealousy until Ethan, who had been quietly keeping tabs on the situation, told me the truth. The condo Ava bought was in a building with serious structural issues. She had been so desperate to prove she did not need the carriage house, so eager to show off on social media, that she had rushed into a purchase without proper inspection. The condo had plumbing problems, a leaking roof, and a heating system that barely functioned. Within weeks, Ava's Instagram post changed. Gone were the excited photos of her new space. Instead, there were complaints. Flooded bathroom at midnight. So much for the dream. Another repair bill I cannot afford. Why is adulting so hard? I did not take pleasure in her suffering, not exactly. But there was a certain poetic justice to it. Ava had wanted something beautiful that she had not worked for, and she ended up with something broken that required all the effort she had tried to avoid. She tried to contact me once about 6 months later. I was at the grocery store with Nora when I turned a corner and nearly ran into her. Ava looked different. Tired. Her hair needed a trim. Her clothes, usually so carefully chosen, looked rumpled. "Clara," she said, her voice uncertain. "Can we talk?" Nora pressed closer to my side and I put my hand protectively on her shoulder. "I do not think that is a good idea," I said calmly. Ava started, then stopped. Her face twisted with emotion. "You took everything from me. You took Mom and Dad. You took the house. You made me look like the bad guy when all I wanted was a chance." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. but understanding. Ava had been enabled her whole life. She had never had to work for anything, never had to face real consequences. And now she was drowning because she had no idea how to swim. "I did not take anything from you, Ava," I said quietly. "I fought for what I built. What you wanted was for me to just hand you something that I had worked for. That is not how life works. You have to build your own things." "That is easy for you to say," Ava shot back, her face flushing. "You always had it easier. You were smarter, more talented. Mom and Dad expected less from you because they knew you could handle it." The delusion was staggering. I had been expected to handle everything precisely because I was capable, while Ava had been coddled and excused. But I did not have the energy to argue anymore. "I hope things get better for you," I said, and I meant it. "But I cannot help you. You have to do this yourself." I steered Nora away and we finished our shopping. When I glanced back, Ava was still standing there looking lost. Life moved forward. Nora thrived. Her health continued to improve with consistent treatment, and she grew into a confident, bright child who knew her worth. She kept making her little videos now, documenting happier things: our garden blooming, baking cookies together, her 8th birthday party with friends. The carriage house became exactly what I had envisioned. We painted a new mural in Nora's room, a forest scene with animals and fairies that she had designed herself. I finally furnished my own loft bedroom properly with a comfortable bed and a reading nook where I could sit with coffee in the mornings. We replaced the worn furniture with pieces we chose together. Ethan became more involved in our lives again. Not as a romantic partner, not yet, but as a friend and co-parent. He helped install new shelves in the garage. He fixed the fence around our little vegetable patch. He showed up for Nora's school concerts and science fairs. We were rebuilding trust slowly, learning to communicate better, understanding what had gone wrong the first time. My career flourished. Without the constant drain of family drama, I could focus on my work. I took on more ambitious projects. I won an award for a community center design. I was promoted to senior architect at my firm. My portfolio grew, and so did my confidence. I also started therapy. I needed help processing everything that had happened, understanding the patterns that had allowed me to be treated that way for so long. My therapist helped me see that I had been conditioned from childhood to be the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who kept the peace. Breaking free from those patterns was not easy. Some days I still felt guilty for setting boundaries. But I was learning. One evening, about a year after the court case, Nora and I were sitting on our small patio watching the sunset. She was drawing in her sketchbook while I tended to the tomato plants. "Mommy," she said suddenly, "are you happy?" I looked at her face that was starting to lose its little girl roundness, at the way her hair caught the golden light. I looked at our house, at the windows I had installed, at the garden we had planted, at the life we had built. "Yes, baby," I said. "I am very happy." "Good," she said, going back to her drawing. "Because you deserve to be happy. You are the strongest person I know." Children have a way of seeing truth that adults forget. And in that moment I realized she was right. Not because I had won in court. Not because I had kept my house, but because I had finally learned to fight for myself, to demand the respect I deserved, to refuse to be diminished or dismissed. The last I heard about my parents was through my aunt, the one who had originally told my mother about Nora's illness. She called to tell me that my parents were hurt, that they felt I had been cruel, that family should forgive family. "They disowned me first," I said calmly. "They chose to put me through hell rather than have an honest conversation. They endangered my child. I have not been cruel. I have been protecting myself and my daughter." My aunt was quiet for a moment. "You are right," she said, finally. "I just wanted them to admit it. But they never will." And she was probably right. Some people cannot admit when they are wrong, especially when admitting it would require them to face how badly they have behaved. My parents would likely go to their graves believing they were the victims in this story, that I was the ungrateful daughter who had turned on them. I made peace with that. I did not need their approval anymore. I did not need them to understand or acknowledge what they had done. I had my own validation. I had my daughter, my home, my career, my self-respect. The carriage house stands as a monument to something important: that you can build your own future, that you do not have to accept crumbs when you have earned the whole feast, that family should be about love and support, not manipulation and favoritism. Every time I turn the key in the lock, I remember that this is mine. Not because it was given to me, not because I inherited it, but because I built it with my own hands, paid for it with my own money, and fought for it when it would have been easier to walk away. I taught Nora that love should not cost you your dignity. I taught her that boundaries are not cruel, they are necessary. I taught her that you fight for what you build, and you do not let anyone take credit for your work. And on the really hard days when I am tired and the old guilt creeps in, when I wonder if I should have just given in to keep the peace, I remember standing in that courtroom watching Ava's videos play on the screen. I remember my mother's voice saying, "We need to find something we can use." I remember my sister bragging about getting a free house. And I remember that I am not the villain in this story. I am the hero who saved herself and her daughter from a toxic situation. I am the woman who learned her worth and refused to settle for less. My home is small, just a renovated carriage house in someone else's backyard. But it is mine. Fully, legally, undeniably mine. The locks are strong. The foundation is solid. And no one can take it from me ever again. That is worth more than any amount of family approval. That is worth the fight. That is worth everything. So here is what I want you to take away from my story. Your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice for people who do not appreciate you. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Family does not get a free pass to treat you badly. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your value. If you are in a situation like I was, where you are being used, manipulated, or taken advantage of, I want you to know that you deserve better. Document everything. Stand your ground. Fight for what is yours. And do not feel guilty for protecting yourself and the people you love. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were treating you unfairly? How did you handle it? What advice would you give to someone in a similar situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes people need to know they are not alone, that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you are worthy of respect. You are worthy of love. And you are worthy of keeping what you have worked for. Never forget that.